This gang of roustabouts are cutting up cinema like it's never been cut up before. There's gonna be reviews, there's gonna be interviews, there's gonna be hijinks, and there's gonna be a whole lot of cutting in this room. The Cutting Room Movie Podcast, coming at you 128 kilobytes per second.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, savage cinephiles, thank you for finding mini episode number 10 of the Cutting Room Movie Podcast, where you can expect to find, on any given broadcast, movie reviews, interviews, and hijinks served up to you in absolute random order. I'm Joe Cristiano, and I'm joined tonight by my filmmaking collaborator, Billy Barassa. Billy, what's happening, brother?
How you doing, man?
Good, man. I'm ready to get into some Jan Svankmajer.
I know you're a huge fan, man. I think I saw, first one I saw was actually one of his features, and I thought it was pretty amazing. But I know that ever since you got onto him, he's been like a bit of a muse.
Yeah, well, you know what the good thing about the Cutting Room is that, you know, you actually have to you put yourself to task and try to figure out what it is that you like about these films.
Yeah.
And his film, I think it was called Going Down to the Basement or something like that. The Cellar, I think it was called.
Right.
Was definitely an inspiration for The Nightmare, more so than I thought it was. And,
there's always a fine line there.
I know, there's a fine line between inspiration and thievery, I guess, right? So, and then I'm gearing up to do another little, 5-minute weird short, and this Cutting Room thing helps to kind of, search for your ideas, and I'm happy you came on with me here to talk about Jan Svankmajer.
You heard it here, folks. Joe Cristiano is going to crack the surrealist nut of Jan Svankmajer here tonight, live.
That's right. And so without further ado, I will give you my introduction of The Garden.
He writes novels and screenplays while eating chicken sandwiches and wearing giant man necklaces. He sounds like a dim bulb, like Lenny from Of Mice and Men, but he's actually very bright. Lock and load for the smartest Joe on the show, Joseph Cristiano.
I'm a bad critic. My biggest trouble is I go to great lengths to look for something good in a film, something validating, something amusing, informative, engaging, thought-provoking. And usually I find it. Now, this quality allows me to love the ribald humor of Sacha Baron Cohen, the maudlin fairy tales of Steven Spielberg, and even, yes, the surrealist oddities of filmmaker Jan Svankmajer. All of them in equal measure, more or less. Now, this irritating persistence in looking for merits in cinema does nothing if not negate my critical authority, any of it that I might try to claim here. How can one man love the dick jokes of Bruno and the cerebral meanderings of 8.5? Well, you see what I mean. Indeed, despite the brush my pal Max likes to paint me with, I thoroughly enjoy films that span the spectrum from lowbrow to common denominator crowd pleasers to the self-indulgent artsy-fartsy. Oh, there it is, that phrase, self-indulgent. It's a word that's been brought up regularly on the show recently, mostly in regard to some of the films I've suggested. Now, I think it's worth considering the expression here because I'd venture to guess that the label self-indulgent could be slapped onto the filmmaker in question here, Jan Svankmajer, and probably all of his work, not just 1968's The Garden. Alright, look, The Garden is not like other films. It's weird. There's no plot to speak of. There's a hedge of humans with no real explanation for it whatsoever. There's talk of rabbits and manure, apropos seemingly of nothing. What's more, it doesn't even seem to understand the very language of cinema that we know. The editing of the film begins to play like musical notes, meting out a rhythm and melody instead of functioning as a cohering agent. On top of all that, it's black and white. I get it. The Garden, Svankmajer's entire body of work, really. It's not for everyone, and that's okay. I really understand it. But that doesn't mean that this film should be easily dismissed because it's quote-unquote self-indulgent. I don't mean to be an agitator here. The opposite, in fact. Maybe what I love most about The Cutting Room is that we seriously ask ourselves why we love or hate the films we love or hate. And by looking into what makes Svankmajer considered to be self-indulgent, I think I can find a good reason why I'm drawn to his films and others that are kindred in spirit. So here goes. A work of art is a reflection of the outside world. It's projected through the lens of an individual, an artist. The best artists leave their mark on that projected image so indelibly that there's no mistaking their work. A Picasso can be nothing else but a Picasso. The same goes for Hendrix, a Kubrick, a Svankmajer. And what I love most in approaching a work of art is seeing the singularity with which these artists see their worlds. No man sees the world the same as another man. When we experience the bold, singular visions of others, we engage with them on a deep level, and we compare and contrast how they see the world with how we do. To see someone else's unique mark, their singular vision, proves to us that there's a unique self in others, and implicitly, we are assured that there's a unique self in us. It reminds us that we exist individually. The only way an artist can project his vision of how his unique self interacts with the outside world is to first come to terms with his self, to explore that self, to indulge that self. And so I believe that great works of art can only come by means of a sort of self-indulgence that I just described. Without the search for self, without the indulgence of self, we get the act of commodity, pandering to the masses, the production of the Hollywood brand of homogenization that we usually complain about here on the Cutting Room. And so I celebrate the self-indulgence of Jan Svankmajer. For if Jan did not indulge himself, he would not have been able to give us his unique perspective on the world, those nightmares that wear the Cheshire grin. His films that feel specific to his time and place, and at the same time brazenly universal. In his films, like The Garden, Jan Svankmajer interprets the world through a private dream logic, and he articulates that logic with a language he's done nothing less than invent himself. At first blush, his films are understood like dreams, arbitrary, meaningless, but intensely emotional. I believe that's all that's needed, really. We spend a full third of our lives dreaming. To have so few works of art speak to us about our dream state is either a gross oversight or cowardice. Why are we afraid to look at what's at the root of the dream? And just like a dream, Svankmajer's films, The Garden included, reveal intimations of meaning the longer you linger on them. Over your cup of morning coffee, the meaning of the dream surfaces like bodies from murky depths. Before long, you can think Svankmajer films are political, moral, even existential. You ask, what did that dream about me joining the human hedge mean? And the best part of it all is that, like dreams, there is no right or wrong interpretation. There is only the sacrament of inquiry. Inquiry, the gleeful hallucinogen for the curious. And to me, there's no greater achievement for a film than to provoke contemplation, to linger in your gut like a dream. And that, Billy, is my self-indulgent review of Jan Svankmajer's The Garden.
There are few reviews that say so little about the film that it's reviewing than that review, Joe.
Thank you.
That was more of a defense of everything against someone and something that I think I might have missed.
Yeah, well, you weren't on the last show, right? Yeah. So I guess it bears a bit of explanation. You know, when we did Fellini, you weren't on that episode either. You know, Tom brought out the word self-indulgent, and then we were talking about, you know, Dave gave us a bunch of films about depression, and Melancholia was one of them. Lars von Trier's Melancholia, and Tom didn't like it, and he called it self-indulgent. So the word it came up another time too. I forget in reference to what, but the word's been popping up now and then. So it's just had me thinking about what that means. And I don't mean to be combative, but, you know, I've been thinking about what it means to be an artist and, you know, what it means to indulge in the self, you know what I mean? And basically what I explained there is that, you know, there's no way for you to come up with the things that we love in art that we expect from our artists than to kind of indulge in the self, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a hard one, man. I mean, I think everyone sort of places the line of demarcation for self-indulgence in different places. So it's hard for me to see someone like Svankmajer as self-indulgent, you know. I mean, as much as, you know, early Fellini is hard for me to see as self-indulgent. His later stuff, yeah, I think he's open to criticism, you know. But yeah, I guess everyone places the line a little bit differently.
it might just be my problem, right? It might just be that when I see something that's unlike anything else, I'm open to it, right?
Mm.
I just open myself to it and I try to understand it, you know? So it's not like I think some people, and I'm not talking about Tom specifically here. All right, let me give you an example. Like a friend of a friend, she does not like to go to art museums, and I think it's because she feels threatened by him, right?
Hmm.
I was she like my wife was going into the city. I was like, oh, why don't you take her to the Met or MoMA, and oh, she doesn't like to do that. And I started asking her one time after a few beers, why not? And I just got the sense that she sort of felt like she wasn't understanding something
Hmm.
about it. You know what I mean? And I think it's just it's just it pains me because I derive so much joy from art, you know what
Mm.
I mean? And it hurts me to think that people like there's like this level of pretension around the art world that
Yeah.
threatens people like if they're not understanding something. And
Well, because
so
there's an array of bullies surrounding anything good who are telling you you're a douchebag because you don't understand it, which is you
right.
have to basically fight your way through the barrier of douchebags to get to the good stuff, you know?
Right, right. And like what I said in that review there is that, if you don't even interpret the films of Svankmajer, if you just feel them like a dream, I mean, isn't that don't you think that's enough? I mean,
Well, I love Svankmajer, so you know, you're preaching to the choir. It's
I know. Okay,
yeah,
so
I mean, I think that the deal with someone like him is the same as particularly with a writer like Kafka or Gogol or you know any of the guys who write surrealist novels and short stories and stuff. You know, you either like it or you don't. I always go back to aesthetic things. I think that you like anyone who loves a form, whether it's a novel or music or whatever, has kind of a responsibility to themselves to respect themselves enough to shut out the noise of what other people say and just try to listen as honestly as possible. Do I actually enjoy this? And you will surprise yourself, you know?
it's
So,
difficult because so many other factors. What you're talking about is that so many other factors go into your
right,
experience of a film, right?
right.
Like the hype, or the art snobs that
Yeah.
surround it, or the academia that might surround a work like Fellini
Well,
or
and
Svankmajer.
we did the what's his face Harmony Korine episode, and I was telling the guys I avoided Harmony Korine because of the art snobs that were in array around him, you
I
know.
know.
And for the longest time, like you and I had a conversation about this years ago, like avoiding the new release shelf at Blockbuster because the hype is, you know, it infects you and it makes
Right,
you know,
because you can't get a good read on it. So if you're going into a film maker like Svankmajer here,
yeah,
just to sort of keep it in the ballpark
yeah,
here, you're reading, you see the people who like them, right? And like they might be like art school fags or whatever, right?
Jesus.
Or whatever stigmas surrounding a work of art, like the films that we're talking about. So that's gonna sway
Yeah.
your opinion of it, and you might automatically be resisting it, right? You might be threatened by it. But how are you feeling? So you're a fan of Smackmire. I actually think you're the one who first
I
introduced me to
might
him. To be
have,
honest
yeah.
with
I
you, I
saw
think
Little
so.
Odic first, and it had been on the to watch list, and I thought it was pretty insane. And then yeah, I just ended up seeing some of the short films and stuff. But you know, he doesn't hit me, I think, the same way he hits you. I think, you know, there's something especially that you got turned on by in the way he does films. So I guess I'm kind of curious. I mean, obviously they're a lot of fun, and I've seen let's see what else has he done, Faust, Alice,
Yeah.
and yeah, just so many great short films and claymation things. What is it? Did you crack the nut? Did you figure out what it
Well,
is?
I think I sort of hit on it where I like films that invite you to think, that don't give you the answer to them. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like to invite you to contemplate them, and to just, what? Sometimes I'll think about it like a film. Like I don't know what he meant by the garden. You know what I
Should we
mean?
talk about the garden
Well,
specifically?
yeah, yeah. so the garden, right? Like I don't know exactly what he meant, but as I see it the second time and maybe the third time, I think maybe I get a little bit closer to sort of an understanding. But it's like a dream, man, like a good dream, or even a nightmare. Like you can derive good meaning from a nightmare. Like you wake up from a nightmare and you're like, wow, that was powerful. Like it's just an experience, right? And maybe for a film, you'll sit there and you'll chew it over and try to figure out what the hell the artist meant. And maybe you'll come up with a good answer. And sometimes you will, especially if you're trying to write a review about it for the cutting room, right? But sometimes you won't, and I think that's okay too. But I think that it's very rare in cinema that actually exists, and I think that's what I'm drawn to predominantly about
Yeah,
the garden.
I think I mean, The Garden really, I think it's one of his most opaque films that I've seen so far. The others, I feel like they're or they're easy to interpret a little bit, but that one was pretty opaque to me, and I would almost hazard a guess that that was straight from one of his dreams.
I think it has something to do with like impulses that happen below the language level.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
And that's exactly what dreams are. And to be able to, I mean, to take an idea and to bring it to fruition on film takes a lot, even if it's a short film. So you have to be really dedicated to whatever idea it is. And during that process, because you're working with it for so long and because you're investing so much time and energy and usually money on it, you end up really having to define those ideas to justify to yourself that you're actually going to make a film about this
I was
idea,
thinking about that because right before we started recording, we were both watching Dimensions of Dialogue, which Terry Gilliam has called one of the 10 best animated films ever made. And check it out, it's online. I was sitting there thinking that it's broken up into three segments and they're all stop motion. And the first segment has so many objects in motion. If anyone has ever done stop motion animation or hand drawn animation, you realize just what an overwhelming task that is to do what he's doing. I mean, there must be, 150 different objects being animated on the screen all at the same time. And I was thinking to myself, that takes some stick to itiveness because
Yeah.
it's like you have the idea in your head and you're aiming to accomplish it, and then you just have this epic drudgery of actually going and animating that. And it's pretty amazing, man.
That I actually think that his short films are better than his feature length films for sort of all the reasons that we're talking about. I mean, it's really difficult to sustain an abstract idea or to justify to a studio and to yourself to be to be exerting so much energy on a feature length film, where I think the short form is really
Yeah.
nice because you can encapsulate it and you can experiment with it and you can explore.
Yeah.
You know what I
Going
mean?
back to, I mean, Kafka's short stories, and The Trial is great because it's basically a collection of short stories sort of strung together, and it's overall a very short book itself. And yeah, it's pretty incredibly difficult to string that out over a 90-minute period, without getting bored.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, especially in preparation for the short that I'm gonna be making, is the short form itself. Like to me, it's a lot like the best short films. Kind of play like a joke, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a quick setup, there's a slight bit of meandering, and then there's the surprise punchline,
Mm-hmm.
kind of.
Yep.
You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like, is that how you're reading? Is that how you're reading the structure of a short?
I have to
It's
admit,
difficult.
the form has continued to boggle me. It's been 13 years since I've been thinking about short films, and they still, I just, it's not in me for some reason. I cannot really. One of these days, I'm going to write a really good short film, but it hasn't happened yet. And
Yeah.
it's weird. It's just, I do think that the joke is an appropriate template. I think, I think like a pop song, like a little 3 minute folk song or pop song, I think is a good point of
Well,
reference.
that's interesting because I think that I notice quite often with even in the garden and Svankmajer is a repetition. So if you have a song structure where
Yeah.
there's a motif that's repeated three times and then it's alternated with some.
I think part of your like for him has to do with his musical structure, what you were just talking about. Because you've had your fair share of like lyric writing for songs and stuff like that, and his structures are all musical.
Mm,
It's dun 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 ding 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 dun 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 dun. Like, and it's just that
mm.
repetition and then crescendo and yeah. I mean,
Well,
he makes it like little songs.
yeah, well, let's talk about the garden in that
All
regard,
right.
right? So you have a pair of old friends are driving to one of the friends' house up in the hills, and they're driving along, and you kind of get these weird sort of these instances or these inserts or little minor episodes that insert themselves into it, signaling that this is sort of an otherworldly experience, right? And it kind of punctuates what's actually happening, which is just basically a visiting of one guy to his friend's farm. But there's a human hedge standing around this dude's farm, and the visitor, the friend that's visiting, he's consumed with this hedge, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if I should give it away. Here's a spoiler: is that he's so obsessed with this hedge, this human fence, basically, that he just joins them, and then all of a sudden, the minor episodes that came along the way just sort of find a resolution where he joins this hedge and grabs the hands, and then like through the whole time he's like combing his hair with a comb, and so the owner is combing his hair. It's just
Yeah,
like,
there's a resolution that's not a resolution.
hmm.
But it rhymes, like there's just a rhyming scheme to it basically, and it feels satisfying, and that's what makes it weird because there's no reason for it to feel satisfying, but that's part of the dream quality.
Do you have any interpretation on what that might mean, that human hedge? Like, I mean, is it?
Yeah, kind of. One possible interpretation is that it just has to do with dictatorships
Mhm.
and well, not dictatorships, but tyrannical states, and
Mhm.
how there's something in the human that doesn't have to be coerced into becoming part of the system. There's something in us that is innately curious and wants to
Mhm.
join it.
Because he wants to he
No
joins
one
that
forces him,
hedge.
and I mean, I could sort of loosely interpret it as the head of state and the guy who comes to visit him, and the head of state doesn't have to coerce the guy into becoming part of his hedge. He just the visitor wants to become part of it out of some secret desire that he never knew he had.
Right, there's something underneath. There's something implicit that's making all of these people just surround this house. And look, it's a political read that you're talking about.
Right,
So, I mean, if we want to put this into political terms, I mean, he's a Czech filmmaker, right?
right.
So,
Under a
we have all.
communist government that suppressed his films for 15 years.
Right. So you have the proletariat or the working class who are serving the common good, which is, I guess, keeping something in or out of the garden,
Right.
and
The
right.
defense, the
And
defense against the defense of the state.
right. And they're willingly doing it because they don't question the reason why they're doing it. Right. And so this visitor comes in and is like, why? He's like, why? And then see, now that we're talking about it, I'm starting to kind of get it. Remember the one scene or the one shot where he's whispering the reasons in his
Yeah,
hair, in his
totally.
ear, like so like those reasons are whispers. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a solid read, but it's one that like you only get intimations of like early when you're on your first viewing. Like
Yeah.
it was only one that started to sort of surface up.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be total bullshit, like totally making a lateral jump here. I just saw The Girlfriend Experience by Soderbergh,
Mm. Uh-huh.
and it was about 15 minutes after the movie was over. I was thinking, oh, that's interesting. And all of a sudden it went ding, what that movie was about in my head. And I was like, son of a bitch, the whole thing was an allegory.
Mm.
And then I had an idea of what that allegory was about, and then I went online and did some researching, and there's about, three or four major different theories about what the allegory of the movie is,
Uh-huh.
and that's, I mean, I can sort of take or leave allegory in the strictest sense, but part of that dreamlike quality, I mean, you read Freud and the interpretation of dreams and all that stuff, the brain is using forms that the meaning has been sort of sucked out of and then filled with a new meaning that you may not be sure of, and it's just, to me, it's amazing to watch these guys actually do that with such skill, I mean, I can't really, I can't call it self-indulgent because they're conveying that sense of mystery
Mm.
through all the production things, through all the writing, the acting, and the photography and everything, and then delivering it to you directly with all of its mystery intact. It's
Right.
such a
And
gift.
it's great. And you know what? That's one of the things that I find redemptive about doing this show is bringing out these obscure filmmakers, and what you're just saying is look, you readily accept that your interpretation might not be the correct one. And what we were just how we were just interpreting the garden here might very well not be what the artist
Right,
intended, right? You know
right,
what I mean?
exactly.
But the thing is, what I would like to use this as this show as a platform for is sort of just to say that you don't need to be afraid to be wrong in your interpretation of a film, but the fun of it is interpreting it. Nobody expects you to get it right or wrong, like I think it's such a cultural sin, I think, is to make people feel intimidated to just to go and watch a film. You know what I mean? And to be afraid to sort of to have an opinion on something, on a work of art or a film, and to just stay away from it or to shut it out, because you just essentially just shutting yourself out of that kind of thing.
So
Okay.
it sounds to me like you really felt like the boys poked you in the nose a little bit, Joe.
Okay, so
And I haven't heard the episode, so I don't know what's
all right,
going
so
on. But
okay, so we're gonna keep
you're
this.
there's a distinctive tone of defensiveness in all of them.
Right, so I'm approaching this defensively, and you know what? The episode number 30 that's coming out or has came out a few days ago when this is released is Max and Tom gave me a ton of shit toward the end of the show. And listen, man, I just get upset with myself that I let it get under my skin. You know what I mean? Like they're doing it for fun or whatever. And it's difficult for me because I'm not a performer. I'm just interested, a guy who's interested in watching films and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So when they get under my skin, I sort of just like I kind of beat myself up. Like, what the hell am I doing? You know what I mean?
yeah,
So.
yeah. Right on. Well, well, I can't wait to hear that because it's always fun hearing the sparks fly with you guys. Um,
Yeah, they gave me a ton of shit. But all right, well, hey, listen, man, we're gonna this
should
is
we talk a little bit about Schwenkmeyer himself and anything about him, his words, his interviews? I mean, I haven't read too much, but I have read interviews with the guy, and I mean, he's pretty hardcore. Like his movies are playful and crazy and kooky, but he takes theory pretty damn seriously.
yeah. Why don't you tell me, man? Because I actually don't know. All I know essentially are his films. I really know almost next to nothing about the man himself. So except for a bit about the Czech Republic and a little bit about the political situation that he was operating
I don't even
from
know
a,
that much about him. I know that he studied in the 50s at technical school or something, and then he joined a theater movement thereafter, and proudly joined a group of surrealists, and I guess still belongs to that group. He's still working, still making films. He's got one that's supposed to come out in 2015.
Is that right? Oh, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's a
That's
feature and
great.
it's an adaptation of a couple of different things that he's combined into one. And it's supposed to be his most expensive movie to date. So apparently,
Hmm.
he's still able to get funding and all that, which is great. But um, his influences, obviously, I mean, anyone who spends 5 minutes browsing around the web is going to find that, if you look at his films, you'll see Terry Gilliam's influence. You'll see, I mean, there's one of his shorts that's a
Or
soccer
his
game.
influence on Terry
Correct,
Gilliam.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
right. Yeah,
And there's one of his shorts that's a soccer game
that's
that's
great. That
hilarious.
one.
And you're just like, Jesus, the Monty Python guys were drunk one time, and someone showed up with a 16 millimeter reel of Jan Schwenkmeyer, and they said, we have to bring this to British television.
It's so anti-sports, sports like mentality. I gotta give that to Max. He would actually, he's actually gonna really love that bit. Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, and this is where I mean, I can't be defensive about these things, although they I have a hard time calling them self-indulgent because they're hilarious to me. So it's like
Hmm.
when to me, there's no separation between the Marx Brothers, Jan Schwenkmeyer, and Monty Python. It's
Right.
all nonsense, and it's just you've dialed it this way for absurdist comedy, and you've dialed it this way for absurdist dream imagery and nightmares and whatever, but it all comes
Yeah.
out of deep absurd psychological places. So
Yeah. Absolutely, man.
and you and
So
I were just at MoMA a couple months back looking at the Quay brothers
the
exhibit, right?
yeah, the Brothers Kwai. Yeah, absolutely.
Another couple of guys that were majorly influenced by Schwenkmeyer. So I mean, he's got his tentacles out everywhere.
And Tim Burton too, as well. I mean, he
Yep,
just came out with Frankenweenie. He was obviously influenced by Svankmajer back
totally.
then.
It's worth noting too. We should put a link up to this. Just in researching a bit of this, there's a guy, an American cartoonist and filmmaker, by the name of what is his name? Charles Bauer. Charlie Bauer. He was an influence on Schwenkmeyer, believe it or not. And
Mm.
there's you got to see this short film, 1930. It's stop motion, but with full scale objects, just like Schwenkmeyer does. And
Mm.
I won't give it away, but it's about a chicken that eats metal.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. Hey, in the dimensions of dialogue? There's a painter that he references. What's the? Do you know the name of that painter offhand?
Is that Boccaccio?
I think so. The guy who did the portraits of people with fruit.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's
It's just
great.
hilarious.
You know what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna on the show notes I'm gonna post a lot of this stuff up there. A lot of his short films, some of the pictures of that we're talking about, and some of even the influences that he's had, like on the Monty Python stuff. It's really wonderful stuff, and once you start digging, it kind of opens up a whole universe, doesn't it? Yeah.
That painter Arcimboldo. I can never remember his name, but it's
Okay.
Giuseppe Arcimboldo. So, did you have any thoughts about the dimensions of dialogue in general?
It was funny. The last segment I thought was a pretty good allegory for what happens on the cutting room, actually. When there's two clay heads and they're each helping each other out for a while. One gives one the toothpaste, and then the other one has a toothbrush, and they work together. And then there's butter and
Pencil sharpener,
pencil,
bread,
pencil.
butter.
And then all of a sudden they start giving each other, the pencil sharpener gets the toothbrush, and the shoe gets the butter, and then there's just a complete uh,
Communication
dissolve,
breakdown.
communication breakdown, and utter chaos and destruction. It's
Dimensions
freaking.
of dialogue, part three, total destruction.
That's up on the web too, right?
That's up on the web. We should just put a link to all the films here that we like. The other one that
Yeah.
I would love is Darkness, Light, Darkness. Is one of the first short films of his that I saw that I really, really love. It's basically a creature assembling itself out of thin air, which is pretty
Right.
awesome.
One last one, the ossuary is the volume that the garden is on, and
Darkness,
I
Light,
guess
Darkness is also on that
right,
one.
right, that's on there. And the short film, the ossuary, is really freaking great. It's just sort of like a photo montage in a sense of a cathedral, I guess, in Czechoslovakia that has the victims of the plague, like 13,000 or 30,000 bone
Yeah,
skeletons, and they're all arranged in like chandeliers and wall hangings and all this other stuff. Is just and all set to the clanging of a bicycle, the
that's
sound of a
great.
clang to a
What do you think
bicycle.
is going on over there in Central Europe, Joe? What's going on with those people?
I don't know, man. It's so bizarre, and the fact that there's no words in it, and like to a lot of these anyway, and it just strikes me as it's just great, man. But these just pure image and sort of imagination just sort of you can connect to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's fun stuff. You know what? If you can. Here's what I guess I'm imagining responding to someone. I guess I'm gonna imagine myself defending Svankmajer to someone. If you can listen to a Pink Floyd song, if you like absurdist comedy, there's no reason not to watch these. They're fun. I think that's the thing that I look for most in this stuff. Is it fun? Then go friggin' enjoy it.
Right on. And with that said, let's wrap this little mini episode up. What do you say? You have any other last words here, Billy?
No last thoughts, except that I'm looking forward to listening to last week's recording when it comes out.
Yeah, it's a brawl. So it's episode 30 to hear that brawl, gang, and
I'll be returning on the next recording. So I guess I'll wear a cup and shoulder pads and a helmet if I have.
Yeah, we need to come up with something to sort of, to surprise Max and Tom somehow. To do something with them, because they're getting out of hand.
All right, sounds like a plan.
All right, thank you everybody for taking a few whirls around the Svankmajer merry-go-round with us. And remember, you can like us on Facebook at the Cutting Room fan page. You can follow our tweets at Thomas Detloff at Cutting Room Show. We're also on Stitcher, Tumblr, Alltop, and a million other places out there to find our podcast. You can see all the show notes, written reviews, artwork, movie clips at thecuttingroompodcast.com, and I will be posting up a zillion of Svankmajer's stuff, films up there. So, if you want a little collection there, I'm going to do a bit of curating. So they'll all be in one place right there over on our website, thecuttingroompodcast.com. And I especially suggest you go over to the episode 30 page. I am posting Max doing his Ian Curtis arm dance. Billy, have you seen that by any chance?
Ian Curtis arm dance.
Okay, so Ian Curtis is the lead singer of Joy Division, and Max channels Ian Curtis.
Oh, Jesus.
It is friggin' hilarious, man. So go and check that out. Go over to thecuttingroompodcast.com, guys, and check that out. It's unbelievable, actually.
And I also want to remind you guys that we'll be back on March 14th covering film adaptations of plays. Specifically, we'll be taking a look at Neil Simon's The Prisoner of 2nd Avenue from 1975 and David Mamet's Glengarry Glen Ross from 1992. We will also be reviewing the 2012 film Flight for our new DVD release. Until then, we are over and we are out. Later.
Tune in next time to satisfy more of your strange desires. The Cutting Room Movie Podcast. We do chicken right.